All right, everybody. Welcome to the Thomist Poets Reading Series. Very happy to have a poet and scholar, Tim Hunt, here, University in Normal, Illinois, home of the University thereof, but originally from California. And besides his poetry, he's a wonderful scholar of some California-related literature. And with that, though, I am going to toss it off to Tim to hear his poetry.
Well, to start, I want to say thank you to you, Christopher, for having me here, and for all of you who found the time to join us tonight, because I tend to think of poetry as a kind of dialogue, and it's very rare that I get a chance to share work with people and have that sense of dialogue be actual rather than implicit. So thank you for that gift. I'm going to start with a poem called Highway 99. Poem from my new friend, Charlie Mariano. I got this email out of the blue one day from a guy around Sacramento who found my work, and we started talking about Highway 99, and I ended up writing this poem. I'm thinking today of my new friend, Charlie, and how he knows the real road is 99, not the interstate, I-5, that we both still think of as the new road, because we remember when it wasn't there, and know too how 5 pushes north past the little towns as if they aren't there. Rest stops and gas pumps for the tourists, diesel for the long-haul truckers making time on the boss's clock, each mile another dime. 99 is where people live, the people, the ones who don't really count for much, except to each other. And sometimes that's all they got. Can't make time on 99 as you slow through the little towns, and sometimes there's a stoplight and sometimes not. But always the little houses and maybe a boarded up store and a park with weeds and swings. And I'm thinking too of Sammy Vasquez, my friend from when we were boys, who died young, I heard, though I don't know how or when. Schoolyard football at recess as he ran touchdown after touchdown, and how he let me be on his team. Black hair combed back and looking just like Richie Valens, who I'd heard on the radio but only later saw the photos. And sometimes I'd go to his house, and I remember how empty the rooms were, and how his father didn't speak English, but his mother was white and did. And how sometimes he'd show me the little books he was writing and the pictures he'd drawn for them, like Peter Rabbit, because he had the Beatrix Potter ones you could get at the dime store. And the other boys weren't to know, and I didn't tell him. And I wish I knew what happened to those books. This next poem is a dialogue in a different sense. I have this sense that poems enable poems, not that people imitate or steal or fight, but we enable each other. And one day I was reading William Stafford's Traveling Through the Dark, and I thought, this poem draws from, whether Stafford was remembering it or not, Robinson Jeffers' great poem, Hurt Hawks. And then I recalled Stafford, when I was a very young man, telling me about hitchhiking all the way from Kansas when he was 19 or so to Carmel, California to see Robinson Jeffers, and then turning around and going all the way back without actually knocking on the door. There's a phrase here that's borrowed from the Stafford poem, and that's the swerving. And the swerving in Traveling Through the Dark, if you know that, has a somewhat different angle to it. So this is Traveling Through the Light. Recalling William Stafford, recalling hitchhiking from Kansas to California, hoping to meet Robinson Jeffers. In time, you would come to know that the poem is everywhere and all things. Emily, at her kitchen window, glimpsing the cochineal blur, a hummingbird, the morning mail riding on to Tunis. Walt, at ease with the late summer sun, loving the glistening sheen of the broad shoulders as the workers load and unload their wagons, and he imagines he is one with their manly joy, the rowdy, camaraderie. But I was too young to know these things when you were telling me of your pilgrimage, hitchhiking from somewhere in Kansas all the way west to Carmel, hoping to meet the poet. You were what, 19? As you made your way ride after ride, the clattering of the Model Ts and jouncing farm wagons, and maybe a salesman or two with a shiny sedan, the lull of the thrumming tires and the motor's hum deepening your first glimpse of the western mountains. And to the desert, then again the mountains, the Sierras, and at last, as you walked down the hill through the village, the ocean, sun glittered through the trees, then opening vast and endless. Or maybe it was still morning, the waves sighing out from beneath the retreating fog as you turned south, walking on the hillside pines on your left, sand spits and granite on your right, until you came to the Poet's Gate and stood there, looking across the patch of garden at the sea-worn stones, the tower and cottage framed by the eucalyptus. Then turned and hitchhiked all the way back to Kansas, the clattering Model Ts, the farm wagons, and maybe a salesman's car, the desert stars, the mountain stars, those nights, then again the Kansas prairie, as if this were the pilgrimage, and that moment of almost reaching for the gate's latch, your only swerving. This next one is a more personal poem, set in the hospital in Vallejo, California, where my father was very ill after a fall and a heart attack. And he was a sailor at the end of World War II in Pearl Harbor. And so the title, My Father Perhaps Dreams of Pearl Harbor at the End of the War, Kaiser Hospital, Vallejo, California. Dappled in the afternoon light, this the wreck of his body. The sheet almost hiding the spars as if he is washed up on the rocks, where the waves gently rock the broken hull beneath the fallen sail. In this ebbing that passes for sleep, he is waving his arms slowly over and over. And when I take his hand, he pushes it up, forward, then pulls back, as if gripping an oar and rowing. Where, sailor, are we going? I ask, as he rows on. Sailor, I say, here is the ship, come aboard. He brings my hand down to the bedside, then takes it up again, and we row back across the harbor. Sailor, I say, here is the dock. Put up your oar, come ashore. And we mentioned Emerson a moment ago. So I think I'll slide in here a poem called Anecdote of the Rock. And this one is perhaps a sort of rejection of Wallace Stevens' Anecdote of the Jar. Because I don't believe you could actually take dominion with that jar, but that's Stevens for us. And there is a phrase in here that you'll recognize is from Emerson. Anecdote of the Rock. Once upon a hilltop in California, I placed a rock, and sniffing out the drifting smells of manzanita pitch and coyote scat, it bathed its blithe head in that air as it gazed into the sun, saying thank you, and declared this somewhere and everywhere. Then I watched as the sun opened its door. It took the rock's coat, welcoming it in, then turning, closed the door. Let's see. I'm going to read a few poems from a later section in the book that deal in a way with a kind of history, or you might say my memories of being a younger lad. Some people tend to think of this as nostalgia. But I think the nostalgia is how we experience the past. Sorry, nostalgia is how we try to recover the past as we actually understood it then or experienced it then. And I'm much more interested in the past as it problematizes itself for us as we remember it and problematizes our sense in the present. So this one's called 1968. And the only other thing I'll say is I find it odd to think that now feels more fraught than the late 60s felt at the time. The joys of the Vietnam War and such. 1968. Do you remember when we were so sure that all that mattered was injustice, as we wondered what to burn to make us free? The boy at the war protest waving a slip of paper that might, seen from the crowd, be a draft card or driver's license or library card, who's to say? As the girl at his side admires the flickering flame, and I think of the card in my wallet that the law says I must carry, and think too about Canada and jail and napalmed huts and the quiet that probably follows the burning before the world murmurs on again. Or the women, young and old at their different rally, burning their bras to say they reject our gaze as we gaze from the margin as if we understand. Or the black and white flames of the newspaper photos, Watts, Detroit, the burning cars and gutted storefronts, funeral pyres for the old order that will reincarnate as the old order, the embers cooling to ash, and in time the weeds scabbing the cracked and blackened concrete as these flames of anger and hope, of despair and love fade. And we come to know that what we burn will not make us free, whatever it was we thought free might be. I'm going to read a Woodstock poem. When I was still teaching, I would tend to use anecdotes or references to arcane music of my youth that none of my students understood. And given my age, they were sure I had gone to Woodstock, and they would badger me, "Did you go to Woodstock?" And I would never say. It kind of teased them a bit. What I would say is, don't believe everything I say, and then say, don't believe everything you think. So if any of my students ever pick up this book, they will finally know whether or not I went to Woodstock. So I'm going to fess up. So this is Napa, California, in the Napa Valley, where I worked for a summer on the Napa Register, the paper there. Summer job, Napa, California, 1969. Woodstock? I didn't go. I'll tell you other lies, but not that one. The truth? That Saturday morning, I was at work at 5 a.m. reading the AP copy off the wire as the newspaper where I spent the summer pretending I was, or maybe would in time be, a real journalist, sent photos of people my age, half-clothed and shivering in the grayscale mud, and way off, a tiny stage where there might be music. Oh, fuck me in the mud as we imagine we're high on this music we cannot hear, from this stage we cannot see, having smoked some righteous shit that was probably oregano, and dosed with this dot of who knows what, and thank you to whoever you were for your in-the-bushes screw and my tie-dyed dose. Woodstock? No, I didn't go, and I won't pretend I did or wished I had. But yes, I did go see the movie. It's pastoral pretend and pretty colors. The music people say they remember hearing, but mostly didn't. And the ennobled hardships of that pretend community of a generation that wasn't. But two things were real, or seemed that way then, and still do now. The moment Sly Stone takes us higher, the wide arc of his upraising arms as the camera's slowed motion transforms his leap into an ascending fantasy of joy, transcending the dark night as we soar as if with him, that encapsulation of our hope. And Hendrix, in the bleak sunrise, presiding over the emptying cathedral of mud and garbage as the shivering children wake to the morning after. His guitar preaching machine guns and napalm tear gas and faceless troops phalanxed in riot gear. Oh, say, can you see in this dawn's gray light this revelation of that world as it was then and still is? Welcome to that moment. Welcome to this one. Yeah. In 1980, the folklorist David Evans brought a troupe of folk musicians from rural Tate and Panola, Mississippi, on a kind of tour in support of a bunch of field recordings that he'd done for the Library of Congress. And they came to the University of Delaware, where I was then teaching. And the folklorist had to be out of town, so I was asked to spend the day hosting these people and showing them around and making sure they were taken care of. And so that meant taking them out to dinner before the gig. So imagine this is basically in a kind of Applebee's sort of restaurant with about a dozen people from rural Mississippi of various ages who were very, very tired and been on the road a long time. And one of them was Hammy Nixon, a harmonica player of some fame, who used to run with Sleepy John Estes, if you know that name, a major bluesman of the 1930s. So this is called My Dinner with Hammy, Newark, Delaware, 1980. The troupe of musicians from Tate and Panola counties sit around the table in this restaurant with shiny plastic menus, as if they've walked off their Mississippi farms into a softly lit TV commercial where they do not belong. The young man who plans to be a city cat leans into his shoulder, head cocked, a knowing half smile verging on sneer, as if he's seen all, knows all, and is already in that somewhere else. Jessie May, the one woman, looks around the table to see what the men will want. In a moment, she will fetch their salads from the salad bar. She acts her place within their world, though it is clear she is only acting, knowing that's what they expect. The stocky man in overalls, 50 or so, glares at the waitress, his raspy drawl a defensive slur as he all but shouts, "Ham and eggs," because he cannot read the menu, and believes this must be yet another Denny's or IHOP with breakfast day and night, and that this white girl will not find him out as he demands his plate of ham and eggs. And she doesn't understand. And he is feeling slighted and so angry, and louder he barks again, "Ham and eggs," raising his fist to pound the table, rousing the white man sitting across the table, who has driven them in a carry-all van all the way north to this college town, who suggests the pork chops with the faux fancy potatoes. And through all this, the only one at ease is the elderly man to my left, who left the Mississippi hills years ago, street corners first, then playing the jukes at the nowhere end of nameless dirt roads, and in time concert stages around the world, and this just another college town. He is tastefully dressed in a nice suit. He touches my wrist with his right hand and leans in a soft voice so only I will hear, but more than a whisper, as he asks me to read him the menu, 'cause my eyes ain't so good. And I do. And he turns to the waitress, a gentleman and master of the moment. He allows her her role and repeats word for word the order he has considered and selected. A man of the world, a man of his world, a man in spite of this world, and in his smile, it is as if there is a world we share. And if he is playing me, I do not care, and choose even now to believe in that moment that we seemed to share. It was a very educational evening for me. I want to read a few poems from a sequence. We're getting toward the end here, so I appreciate your patience. You may or may not be aware of Manzanar. During World War II, the U.S. government saw it necessary. I'm not here to debate the right or wrong, to intern Japanese American citizens in concentration camps. And Manzanar was one of the first ones set up. It's in the Central Valley of California, down almost to the Mojave Desert, at the southern tip of the, oh, come on, drawing a blank here. Sonny, what valley were we in? Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyway, there are two towns that I mentioned here. One is called Independence and Lone Pine. They do actually exist. Manzanar was sort of between them. So believe me, this was not a hospitable place to send these people. It is now a state, rather a national historical monument. If you have the chance to go, I strongly encourage it. It is an occasion for profound reflection on the way peoples and countries manage their histories. And it is not one of our proudest moments. I guess I'll let it go at that. So I'll read 3 of the 9 poems. The first one that I'll read is called National Historic Site. And this is set in the visitor center, which is actually the old high school gym from when Manzanar was operating. The second one is set in Sebastopol, California, where I went to high school. And a number of my classmates were Japanese Americans whose parents had been interned in Manzanar. And then the third one is a response to what was apparently called Saint Chien, which was a garden that somehow people there managed to pull out of the desert as a refuge. It's now mostly desert again, but the site is marked and there are a few just remnants of it. So 3 poems from Manzanar. National Historic Site. In what was the high school gym, uniformed park rangers offer maps and brochures to those who've come as a kind of pilgrimage to honor parents and grandparents, and those who've come as a kind of penance for what the abstraction called government once did, as if in their name, and to those who stopped out of curiosity at the sign proclaiming Manzanar National Historic Site, wondering what could have ever been historic in the July heat of this nowhere between Lone Pine and Independence. In the rooms beyond, the discreetly lit exhibits offer photographs and artifacts with carefully parsed signage, a moral calculus of the dispossession once termed relocation, an unresolvable dialectic of what seemed why and the reality of what. This next one is called Buddhist Temple, Sebastopol, California, 1964. When I wrote this piece, I did not realize that some locals from out near the Russian River, I gather, had tried to burn down the Buddhist temple during the war itself. And a bunch of other white citizens, Anglo citizens, put out the fire and then protected the Buddhist temple for the rest of the war. That's a kind of a side note or footnote to this one. Buddhist Temple, Sebastopol, 1964. In the almost dawn, I ride my bike out to the highway, then on to the grocery store where every morning the truck from San Francisco brings the newspapers to deliver to the big houses on the hill above town. Every morning I pedal and coast past the orchards, past the little houses where some afternoons I play with my friends, and past the church that doesn't have a cross or steeple. It sits back from the highway as if it has been there a very long time, as if it belongs to the trees that shade it. I know it is something called Buddhist Temple, and that this is where Byron and Randy Okamoto go to church. I know that my father and uncles fought in the war and that the Japanese were enemies. At school, I play with Byron and Randy. They are Japanese. They are not enemies, not the Japanese. They are Byron and Randy, who are Japanese just as I am not. These are things I do not think about as I bundle my papers, or we sit at our desks or play schoolyard games. I do not know if Byron or Randy think about them, or have heard of Manzanar. I have not heard of Manzanar. I do not wonder about the parents of Byron and Randy, or if they speak of Manzanar. I do not wonder who in that time of war cared for the temple as it waited in its grove of trees for its people to come back. Things we don't understand at the time. And then the last poem from this sequence, and then I'll finish with kind of a coda poem. Saint Chien, Partially Recovered Garden. And it's in two parts. 1. The plaque says this was Saint Chien, or 3/4 garden. And in the tinted photo, the locust trees frame the desert light as if, hands together and bowing slightly, the glare has stepped back to honor the water in the pool. A temporary piece of deepening shade, deeper even than the beauty that was Saint Chien, or 3/4 garden. The plaque does not name those who dug the pond out with shovels, or skimmed the placed rocks with concrete to hold the water diverted from the thread of creek. The plaque does not say who had the seeds and slips or knew how to nurture the plantings into the world of the tinted photo that says this was not Manzanar, says this is Saint Chien, or 3/4 garden. 2. In this place that was Saint Chien, or 3/4 garden, the leaves of the twisted locust trees still filter the desert noon, and one can sit on a Park Service bench sipping tea from a thermos, studying the now dry stones and patches of concrete recovered from the sand. The water must be imagined, the ferns and flowers imagined. The stepping beyond Manzanar into Saint Chien, that too must be imagined, as if the eye might hear the echo of what was and how it was to be a moment in Saint Chien, that temporary beauty within Manzanar that was not Manzanar, and be for a time within the timeless, or perhaps for a moment timeless within time. If you do go to Manzanar, Saint Chien Garden, what remains of it is on the periphery. I hope you would drive your car around there and at least get out and take a look at the place. You have to see it with your imagination. And yes, thank you, Sonny, at Owens Valley. It's at the tip of the Owens Valley. For a while, I lived in Eastern California, up in the high mountain desert. And this last poem that I'll close with is simply called Is, and it's a desert poem. And it reflects on desert light. Is. The desert has a voice, and its voice is light. At midday, the light speaks the far ridge in a shimmer, the gliding hawk a note of its music. At dusk, as the air cools, the light says, "Let there be dark," and the ridge stands forth against the sky. But best is the moment when the risen light pauses and says nothing at all, and everything is. Thank you very much for your time.